You've seen the guys on mountain bikes downtown. I
Yes,
did that
yes.
for a while. Worked undercover, worked community policing. Then I worked undercover for about 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was that experience?
But be audacious. Don't let anybody talk you out of it. Don't let anybody tell you you're too young or too short or too Hispanic or your name sounds too ethnic or you grew up on the wrong side of the tracks or you speak funny, you speak with an accent. Don't let anybody tell you any of that. Just if you want to do it, set your mind to it and make it happen. I want people to know that whether my career here as Bexar County Sheriff is 9 years, 12 years, or 48 years, at the end of it, I will have left it all on the field. I play that way every single day. I don't hold anything back. So at the end of it, I can promise you, you'll have gotten all of my effort.
On this episode of Momentos and Voices, I had the honor to sit down and speak to Sheriff Javier Salazar. We spoke about how he rose through the ranks to get to the position that he's at right now, Sheriff of Bexar County. And he also offers advice to the younger generations who want to aspire to be in the position that he's at. And we also talked about the importance of community. Get ready for an inspiring, motivational, and exciting episode. Sheriff Salazar, thank you so much for being here at Momentos and Voices. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you here. I know we've been back and forth a little bit on getting you here, and I honestly cannot believe that it's finally happening.
Oh gosh, you act like you haven't interviewed me a million times already, right? But it's always a good
Special.
time. Yes.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for being here. Really, I told you before we started, you're a person that I truly admire.
Oh.
I've known you for a few years. When I first started my career in media, you were a PIO back then. And then I've seen you obviously become a sheriff, and we've kind of grown in our different careers, but it's great to see you and be able to talk to you in a different setting.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So I'd like to start from the beginning. I always like to start, just getting to know you. Who is the human behind the position, the important position that you have? Who's the human behind the sheriff, right? So if you just want to tell me a little bit about you, where you're from,
Okay.
Where did you grow up? Just go for it.
Okay. I was born 54, almost 55 years ago in Universal City. Actually born at Fort Sam, but grew up in Universal City, Schertz area. The youngest of 6 kids.
Okay.
The youngest by a long shot. I'll go into that later. But the youngest of 6 kids. My dad at the time was in the Air Force.
Okay.
But he was toward the tail end of his career. He did 20 years, but I was 5 when he finally retired. But he was also in radio and TV, and in music.
Wow.
My mom was a stay-at-home mom,
Okay.
and she was from Reynosa, Mexico.
Muy bien.
Yeah. But grew up in a household that we spoke Spanish and English. We learned both.
Good.
We learned to be proud of both. We learned to speak both correctly. It was weird, and I'm sure you hear this a lot from folks in my generation that my parents grew up in a time where you weren't allowed to speak Spanish in schools. And that was by design, right? Here's my take on that is I think it was an honest effort for people to kill our culture, to kill our language. And that was the way they did it, is to suppress that. And so, as you know, a lot of folks in my generation don't speak Spanish because their parents took that to heart. So I'm not going to teach them. No, my parents taught us to speak Spanish, to speak it correctly. And you speak it in school and church and wherever you feel like it. And if anybody has any problems to say, you send them to me.
Good.
And so, we learned to be very, very proud of our heritage and very, very proud of our language. And we are to this day.
That's awesome. I'm sure it's helped you a lot along your career to know both languages, especially living in San Antonio, right?
Absolutely. Look, it helped me get the job as spokesperson, as PIO when I was at the BID, and it helped me out a lot. It helps to not have to tell half the news media, sorry, there's nobody here that can talk to you because we only speak English here. It was great to be able to do those news conferences. So to this day, it's very, very helpful. Early in my career, even though, as a young SAPD officer, I broke out when I first became a peace officer. I broke out in the shallow west side of San Antonio, right there by UTSA downtown, by the jail, where my jail is now. That's where I broke out. And there were entire shifts where I wouldn't speak a word of English the entire shift. because I was speaking Spanish on my own calls or running from call to call, translating for others that could not. So it's always been a very helpful thing for us.
Good. I'm sure you're very thankful to your parents for
Absolutely.
for not caring what the rest of the society was saying about the language, right?
Absolutely. Matter of fact, I think my dad loves a fight. So I said, Dad, I feel like you taught us Spanish and just threw us out there as bait because you wanted somebody to say something, right? Of course, he'll never tell, but I think he did it just to prove a point.
That's awesome. That's great. That's awesome. And so you grew up in Universal City?
Yes.
You went to school there as well?
Okay. I grew up, went to Shirt Cibolo School District.
Okay.
Graduated from Clemens High School.
Okay.
And back then, nobody knew where Clemens High School was because it was out in the middle of the country. It was out in the middle of nowhere. You had to drive for an hour to get to Clemens. And now it's just a big, huge city,
in the middle of
right?
the city.
Yeah, exactly, absolutely. Who'd have thunk it? But it was neat coming from a place that nobody knew where it was when I was growing up, and now it's one of the most vibrant, most thriving areas of the county here.
Right. Right. And so then you said you were the youngest of 6. So how far apart are your siblings?
So there's 6 of us. My oldest brother is 14 years older than I am.
Okay.
Next below him, that brother is 12 years older than I am.
Okay.
Beneath him are twins that are 10 years older than I am. And then the next one under them is my sister. She's 8 years older.
Okay.
Then there's an 8-year gap in me.
And then you.
So here's the thing. Everybody says, "Oh wow, you must have been the accident, that happened after." And then, interestingly enough, I'm the only one that they planned.
Oh.
Yeah. So my dad being in the military, my siblings. I know this is a family show, so we're not going to get too much into it. But my siblings coincide with my dad's deployments.
Gotcha.
He'd come home, he'd leave. My mom was ready to have a baby.
Makes
Exactly.
sense.
So I was the only one that they thought they were done having kids after my sister, and my mom said, "You know what? I want to have a baby. I want to have another baby." And so my dad, growing up, whenever I would get in trouble, my dad would tell my mom, "Oh, there you go. There's your one more for old time's sake. You handle it. You take care of it." So it was always a good time around our house.
So were you a pretty rebellious kid, or
I was that kid that it didn't matter. Like, the teacher always has that kid sitting, or let's move you because you talk too much.
Yeah.
It didn't matter who they moved me next to because I talked to everybody.
Yeah.
So it's cool. But I always managed to talk my way out of trouble.
Nice.
I really did.
Nice. That's awesome. That's good. And so at what point, after obviously you went to high school, then you went to college? What did you study in college?
So in high school, I was a theater kid. I was into sports, right? But I wasn't the biggest kid around. And so I was never like a star athlete, but I played all the sports. What I found a passion for was theater.
Okay.
And soon thereafter, when I graduated high school, I thought I was going to go into the entertainment business like my dad did.
Okay.
And because growing up, when I was 5 years old, he worked at Queda. Remember, KDA, the radio station?
Yeah, of course.
He worked at Queda. Okay. And when I was 5 years old, he'd have me doing radio promos. So I used to do voiceover work when I was 5 years old. I didn't get paid, but I did voice. I learned how to
your
do
resume, right?
Exactly. I learned how to do voiceover work. And so when I was in junior high all the way through high school, he had a TV show, Spanish music variety show. And I learned how to run the camera, but I also learned how to host. I learned how to be a spokesperson.
Okay.
So I thought that's what I was going to do. Well, fast forward to now, it's what I do, right? Yeah. It's a big part of what I do. But that was what my roots were in. And so I thought I was going to go into that. When I graduated high school, I started out being a radio, television, film major at SAC, RTF. Okay. And then I just realized, look, I don't want to do this. I think I want to serve the community somehow. My dad didn't really push us much toward the military. He left the military honorably, right, after a 20-year career, but he left with a bad taste in his mouth, and we'll go into that, why. But he didn't really encourage me to go into the military, and so I just kind of worked for about 3 years as a bartender while I was deciding what to do, working my way through college. Okay. And then I figured out, I'm going to try law enforcement because I don't want to deploy. I don't want to have to be coming home and having kids between deployments like my dad. I want to grow some roots and have a family. So law enforcement was the next best thing for me.
Wow.
And so I decided to try it. The other thing that really appealed to me is we were not a wealthy family, and I needed a way to pay for college. Okay. So the police department had tuition reimbursement. And so I said, look, at the very least, I'll work my way through college. And then when I graduate college, we'll see what happens at that. I'll see if I stay with it or not.
And here
fast forward to now, here I am. I stayed with it.
And so did you do your law enforcement here in San Antonio? You went to school for that here?
I did. Okay. I did. I changed majors once I became a law enforcement. I didn't graduate college first. I was still working my way through college when I joined the police department. Gotcha. And so then I changed majors to become a criminal justice major. Graduated from San Antonio College. Okay. And then soon thereafter, Wayland Baptist University. I got my bachelor's from Wayland.
Okay.
And loved it.
So you went through the academy and everything.
I did.
Here.
I went through the academy here with SAPD.
Okay.
And now I'm in my starting my 33rd year in law enforcement.
Wow.
Now, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you were talking a little bit about your dad not having the best experience.
And you can Google this, but it's a pretty well-known fact. So years ago, there was a group of, I don't remember how big the cohort was, but several thousand minority veterans that were owed medals, that they didn't get their medals. And my dad was among that group, several thousand and mostly minorities. And look, let's face it, they were not given their medals because of their race. African-American, Hispanic veterans for the most part. And so my dad, we grew up hearing stories about his military career, but, he never had any medals to show for it. And so, he would tell us about how he was wounded in action, and it happened in 1965. I was born in 1970, right? Okay. In 1965, we know this now. He was wounded in action in 1965, and he did a very brave thing. He saved the lives of some pilots that were medicated in the office. They were wounded, they were medicated, they were under sedation. He ended up saving these guys, pulling them up out of bed and carrying these big, huge pilot guys to a bunker, leaving them there in safety, and then he went back and he locked himself in the room with some classified records that were there, and then guarded the records. He says, "Look, if I'm going to fight because the base was under attack," and so he was like, "Well, I'm going to protect these records from falling into the wrong hands, and if at the end of the thing happens, I will burn this whole place down, but they're not going to get these records." And so it was a very brave thing that he did, and he was put in for the medal. They put him in for it. And he didn't end up getting the medals. And so then finally, by the time it worked its way through and he was able to get his medals. So this happened 5 years before I was born. Okay. I was 43 years old when they finally gave him his medals. I was there when they finally recognized him with a Purple Heart and the Bronze Star. Huge, big deals. Both of those medals are big, huge deals. Huge deals. And he was he's still to this day very bitter about it. He's proud of the fact that he was in the military, proud of the fact that he's a proud veteran, proud of the fact that he finally did get his medals. But what makes him mad about it the most is not just the medals, right? But those medals come with benefits for the family. He says, so basically they cheated the family out of 48 years worth of benefits that would have come with this, extra pay and, all these benefits that would have come. And so that was the thing that made him the most mad, is they cheated us out of these
And they
things.
Didn't give you back that money?
No, it was not. No, it wasn't retro. It was just here's your medals. Thank you for your service. And so, to this day, that's one way to get him mad, is get him talking about that.
Makes sense. I would be too.
Yeah. So, for obvious reasons, he didn't encourage us to join the military. Gotcha. Two of my older brothers did end up joining the military. I just didn't. Okay. So law enforcement was the way to go for me.
And so then after you finished the academy, you went straight into SAPD?
I did. I went to the San Antonio Police Academy in 1992. We started, graduated in 93. Okay. And, hit the streets after that and worked my way up. I was, patrol for a while. Did bike patrol downtown. You've seen the guys on mountain bikes downtown. Yes, I did that for a while. Worked undercover, worked community policing. Then I worked undercover for about 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
How was that experience?
It was fun. It was a good single man's job. It wasn't fun anymore once I got married and started having kids.
So you got married while you were a detective?
I did. I met my wife when I was a detective, and she used to her pet name for me at the time was Mr. Detective. You know, she would that was her pet name when we first started dating. But yeah, soon thereafter, I made sergeant and we got married and had children and you know, well, she came into the marriage with a child already. My older daughter's my stepdaughter.
Okay.
But we don't. I don't call her we don't call we don't call her my stepdaughter. She's my daughter. I've been raising her since she was 4.
That's awesome.
But soon thereafter, we had Isabella. Soon after we got married, we had Isabella, and just you know what, this is not a fun job anymore. This is kind of nerve-wracking, and so decided to try something different. And so that was when I went to go work for Chief McManus.
Okay.
In
As
2008.
PIO.
No, initially I went to work in an administrative role. I wanted to be the PIO.
Okay.
But look, in law enforcement, and here's my advice to people, because I know that's one of the things later I'm going to give advice to those entering this profession. A lot of what you do in every profession, and law enforcement is no different. The business sector, the media, if you want a job, a certain job, you're going to have to work your way toward that. You're going to have to make yourself useful. You're going to have to do what we call in law enforcement, politic for the job. So in other words, I knew I wanted to be the spokesman for the police department, right? But I also knew that those kinds of jobs aren't just given to anybody. You have to know someone. Okay. And so I knew, okay, I'm working as an undercover narc in narcotics. Chief McManus doesn't know who I am. Why would he make me the spokesman? He has no idea who I am. I'm going to have to go work with him on a daily basis so he sees the work that I'm capable of. And so I went and I did a job in his office, in Chief's office, administrative sergeant. And I hated the job. I did. I hate it. I'm not an administrator. I hate administrative stuff. I hate paperwork. But I did that job knowing that, look, I'm going to impress him. I'm going to wow this guy, and I'm going to get my dream job. Yeah. And it took me a couple of years of working, doing that job and some administrative stuff. And I was finally able to get the job. I worked my way there in the chief's office. I was an internal affairs investigator and did several other different jobs, but finally it paid off. In 2012, I became the spokesman for the police department.
Nice. And was it, so you said that was kind of like your dream job. Was it everything you had dreamed of? Because sometimes that happens too. You're like, this is what I want, this is what I want. And then you get there and you're like, oh, maybe this isn't exactly what I want.
It was, I was in my dream job. I was going to retire there. I was going to stay there for the rest of my career. I wasn't going to promote because in law enforcement, when you promote, you got to leave whatever job you're in to go do something else.
Okay.
So I said, I'm not going to promote. I'm going to stay a sergeant, and I'm going to be the PIO forever. And then, as you get in there, what's the saying? You want to hear God laugh? Tell him what your plans are. Your plans change. Yep. I after a couple of years of doing that job, while I loved it, I wanted more. I wanted something else. Yeah. So I said, you know what? I want to run my own agency. I want to do something more. I want to do what Chief McManus does, but I didn't want to do it in the police department. I wanted to go off and do something different. Okay. So one day my wife and I were talking, and she says, "Look, tired of you talking about it. So either do it or don't. Stay put and shut up and do your job, or go, but just stop talking about it, right?" And so I said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" I said, I could go be a small town chief somewhere. She goes, "No." Well, I could go be a school district chief. She goes, "No, nothing against that, but no, just either stay where you are or, I don't know, run for sheriff or something." And it had never occurred to me. And, you think you could? You think I could? And then, well, yeah, why not? You set your mind to it and do it. Talk to my dad. My dad was I was never very politically active. My dad was. Okay. So I talked to him about it. He says, "Yes, I think it's a great idea." And so we went, and there began the campaign for sheriff at that point.
Wow. And because at the time when you started running for sheriff, obviously you had already been working as a PIO for a few years with Chief. How did he take the news when you told him, "I'm gonna"?
Chief?
Yes.
So we knew that I knew. I said, "Look, the minute I tell him that I'm going to run for sheriff, I know that I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to have to quit being the spokesman, right? Conflict of interest, that's huge." So I knew, okay, they're going to I knew I could keep my job as a police officer, but I wasn't going to get to be the PIO. So I called him in one day and I said, "Hey, Chief, look, I'm looking to do something different with my life." And he took it in. I told him what it was, and he took it in. He looks at me and he goes, "Welcome to the big leagues." And he says, he's obviously, I can't get too involved. I can't help you win, but I can certainly, I'm supportive of you, and I hope
That's
I
awesome.
hope you do well. But if you're going to do it, do it. And so I did. And so thankfully, I didn't have to leave the police department. I just had to step down as PIO. So I made that announcement that I was stepping down, and ran my campaign. They put me on. They kind of tucked me away in a unit that was still a covert unit. So my job for my last year, about 15 months in the police department, was I ran the agency's integrity unit. It was called the intelligence unit when I took over, but I changed the name to the integrity unit. What we did there in the integrity unit is I supervised the detectives whose job it was to investigate criminal allegations against law enforcement officers.
Okay.
So it's different than internal affairs, right? Internal affairs investigates administrative
Got it.
violations. These guys investigate criminal.
Criminal.
So that was what I did for my last assignment with the police department, while I ran a full-time campaign. And so it was running a campaign's a full-time job too.
Yeah.
So I would come to work in the morning and have like a suit or jeans and a t-shirt in my truck, and then I would come in uniform or whatever, and then so I'd start the day out, and then if I had to finish out the day after work, I'd be going block walking, so I'd change into my jeans and t-shirt and then go block walking. If I had a debate, then I'd put a suit on and I would change. Wow. Sometimes in the middle of the day, I would have to clock out and go to a Chamber of Commerce luncheon or something to meet people, and then come back to work, clock back in, change back into what I was wearing. So it was a lot of moving parts during that time. And look, let's face it, the sheriff that was here at the time, she was not unpopular. And she was a tough candidate. She was a tough opponent, but I did it. Yeah. I did it. Election night, I think you were there.
I was there. I'll never forget that
I
moment.
won. It was the last 2 minutes, literally the last few ballot boxes that came in.
Yep.
I had been losing the entire night, and then I started closing the gap, and right at the last minute, I popped over by like less than a percentage point. Yep. If I wasn't a Dallas Cowboys fan, I wouldn't appreciate a come from behind victory like that. But I won, and I couldn't believe it when they first told me that I had won, and it was an electric room.
I'll never forget that moment. We were covering it. They had sent me to cover you. It was one of my first elections as a reporter. And I think I was telling you behind the scenes that they told me, if he wins, you better be the first one to get a live interview with him tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I did. I remember I pulled you. I was like super nervous because it was my first time. And I asked you, and you're like, yes, of course. Catch me after I do all my interviews. And I did, and you were there, and it was like a gold star for me. So I'll never forget that moment.
Yeah.
And I do want to tell you that when you were PIO, we all, especially the people that worked in Spanish media, appreciated so much the fact that you were always willing to give us Spanish interviews, because that's not common, especially, in law enforcement. I don't know if it's changed. I haven't been in media in a while, but it's not as common to hear it in the two languages. So having you be there for the community, the Hispanic community, was always like, oh, thank God he's going to be there. He'll be able to give you that opportunity. And so speaking a little bit about that, obviously very proud of your heritage. You're a Hispanic. How does it feel, or what is your message to the other Hispanics out there that maybe are wanting to get to a position so important as yours? I mean, you must feel very proud to be one of the first Hispanics holding such an important role in the city of San Antonio.
Well, I mean, it's neat. Several of the sheriffs before me were Hispanic. One of those sheriffs prior to me, Ralph Lopez, was actually the first PIO sergeant at SAPD before he became sheriff. So I was not even the first SAPD PIO to become sheriff. But with that being said, I know I won't be the last for certain. Yeah. But my advice to young kids deciding to, because that was very audacious of me to decide, you know what, I could do that job, and then I'm just going to go take it from that person that's got it. That was very audacious, right? But be audacious. Don't let anybody talk you out of it. Don't let anybody tell you you're too young or too short or too Hispanic, or your name sounds too ethnic, or you grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, or you speak funny, you speak with an accent. Don't let anybody tell you any of that. Just if you want to do it, set your mind to it and make it happen. And
I think you've always been a very big advocate for everybody. You are a community person, right?
Sure.
You are there for the community, and you can tell that your heart and your passion is to serve the community, especially the community here in San Antonio and Bexar County. You have always been a huge advocate as well for the Hispanic community, and we've seen some terrible cases in our city. And I don't want to get political or anything, but I think it's a breath of fresh air to have a sheriff that advocates for minorities. I mean, not just Hispanics, but really minorities and everybody here in San Antonio.
Thank you. Well, one of the things that really, one sure way to get my goat is to pick on anybody that's marginalized, or try to marginalize somebody, and then to justify picking on that group, that person or persons. Perfect example that comes to mind is the Martha's Vineyard case from several years back. That's still ongoing. It's still ongoing, but stuff like that is what really just rubs me the wrong way. Is you hear these people that were here legally at that time. They were walking around the streets legally here, and just somebody up and decided to mess with them just to make a political statement. And that's just horrible. It's a horrible tragedy, because I think the people that did that thing would have been content to let the world believe that this was a bunch of Tren de Aragua, MS-13 people that they were doing this to. There were kids in that group. There were elderly people in that group. These people were not harming anybody. Some people may disagree with how they got here, but they were here legally at that time, and to do that with them, that really just rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of those cases, where we're constantly seeing that mistreatment, and I do thank you on behalf of the community that you're such a big advocate for that, and that you're doing your part to put an end to those sorts of situations.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you. And so, being a sheriff, obviously we know what you do. We see you on the news. We see you everywhere. But is there anything maybe behind the scenes that people don't see? I mean, I guess my question is, when you first got the position, your first day as sheriff, were you like, okay, let's do it? Or were you like, oh, what did I get myself into?
To this day, there's still days where I go, oh, what did I do, man? But no, I mean, that first day was interesting. But ever since then, it's every day is, although there's very few things that surprise me anymore after over 30 years in law enforcement. Sometimes we do run into the odd situation that's like, well, we've never seen that before, but well, let's deal with it. Let's just handle it the way the appropriate way. I don't let my folks take the easy way out. We're going to handle it right, because if we don't handle it, then somebody else is going to have to come handle it for us. So let's just do it the right way from the onset, and we handle it open and honestly with the public. I'm very transparent. So, I'll give you a perfect example. Whenever let's say a deputy gets arrested for something, DWI, domestic violence, whatever it may be, right? Because we're humans too, and it happens. There's a one school of thought in public office where it's like, well, you don't want you to be associated the face of that bad news. Send your spokesman out to go deal with that, right? Hide behind your spokesman and let him go handle it. And I'm like, no. Because the people that are out there didn't vote to elect my spokesman. They elected me. Yep. And so I can't just be out there kissing babies and shaking hands when it's a tough time, and I don't necessarily want to walk through those doors and give that press conference. I do it anyway because it's my job to do that. And then, we tell I'm always very upfront. Here's how we handled the situation. It was an ugly situation, but here's how we handled it. And here's how we're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that playbook has worked time and time again for us. That's the way I prefer to do things, is do it openly and honestly, do it out loud, do it publicly, and talk about how you're not going to let it happen again.
And I'm sure it's not always the easy thing to do, not the easy route, but it's the correct route to go.
Absolutely. Because if, let's say no comment, you're going to keep... You
look worse.
There were reporters that show up at my house to get that, right? So it's like, let's just rip the Band-Aid off and call a press conference, and we'll just do it, and we can move on.
And you obviously deal with a lot of difficult situations. I mean, we were talking about a few before we started. As a reporter, I got to see some terrible things. I can't even imagine what you see on a daily basis. Where do you get your strength from? I mean, do you have a support group at work where you kind of maybe like an advisor group, or I'm assuming your wife is there.
Oh, my wife's a big support system for me, in and of itself. We're empty nesters. Well, we're almost empty nesters. My mother-in-law just recently moved in with us.
Okay,
Which
okay.
is delightful, by the way. No,
Say that again. Say that again.
So, but she's a shoulder to cry on, even though she's not in law enforcement. She's a teacher. She understands a crisis, and sometimes she understands when I look. I'm just going to leave him alone for a little while. Like, let him go mess around with the horses, and he'll come in and talk to me when he's ready. But sometimes she knows I want to talk about it, so she's look. I don't know a whole lot about how to fix the situation you're in, but I'll listen to you. Yeah. And she's great. She's great at that. My dad's a good support system. We lost my mom in 2021, but my dad's still somebody that I call for advice. And even though he's not, doesn't come from a law enforcement background, offers me the best advice. He's been in a leadership role before, so he understands that. And then of course I've got chiefs. I've got 10 chiefs that help me out on the day-to-day basis and making decisions and whatnot.
That's great.
So I've certainly got no shortage of people that I can turn to when I need a bit of advice or just a sounding board.
And that's great to hear because, sometimes we see people in your position, as a sheriff, and we almost dehumanize the position, right? We don't think that you're going to call your dad after work. Like I call my mom after work, after every situation in life. And it's great to hear that because at the end of the day, you're still human, right? And you still pick up the phone and call your daughters and call your wife. And I'm sure you still cry and,
Sure.
You mentioned your horses. Are you, is that kind of like your hobby, your escape?
So, this is a bad habit of mine. I'll take something that's a hobby and I'll incorporate it into my work. And then next thing you know, it's work, right? So here's the funny thing with horses. I got into horses when I was about 11. My dad introduced me to charreria back when I was, And so when, we grew up in the suburbs. I was never a country kid at all. Okay. So, my dad introduced me to charreria, and I fell in love with horses, with the history of it all, the pageantry of it all. Never got to compete in charreria, but I was really always in love with the sport. When I was 12, I saved up and I bought my first horse, Adelita. Aww. And we kept Adelita at a charro ranch that was on the west side of San Antonio. Okay. We lived on the northeast side. So it was a 45-minute drive to go feed the horse every day. Wow. And so I always told my dad, on that drive, gosh, when I grow up, I'm going to have my own place with my horses are going to live in my yard, and I'm going to work my way toward. So it took me several years to finally do that, but ultimately I do live in the country, and I live on a piece of property, and I have 3 horses that are there with me. And 2 of those horses are my mounted patrol horses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
awesome.
So when you see me in the parades and whatnot, those are actually my horses.
That's great. That's awesome. And so do you go out there every day and kind of spend time with them?
Yep. I'm out there every single day, spraying them with fly spray or deworming them or, getting them out of whatever trouble they've gotten themselves into, wrapped up in barbed wire, or they're always into something.
Yeah.
Right? They're like big dogs, big cats. They're always into mischief. But I'm out there feeding them every single day.
That's awesome.
Changing their water and just enjoying their company as well.
That's great.
And now they've heard me. They've seen me. They've seen me cry too. The horse. Sometimes I just go out there and I'd hang out with them.
I'm sure if those horses could talk, they could tell us a lot.
Absolutely.
That's great. And you've been offering a lot of advice throughout this whole conversation, which I truly appreciate. But if you could go back and maybe just offer the one piece of advice that maybe you would have liked to listen to when you were starting your career, or maybe now as the sheriff, what would you tell especially a young person that maybe is aspiring to have the position that you have?
Set your goal, whatever that goal is going to be. And then anything or anyone that doesn't help you get to that point needs to be eliminated from your life. You know what I mean? If it's old habits or your friends from a different time in your life that maybe tend to hold you back, or if they're not helping you get there, then they got to go, right? It doesn't have to be ugly. You don't have to tell them, hey, I can't be your friend anymore, but maybe you stop hanging out with those types of people and start hanging out with those that do encourage you to attain those goals. And then once you get close to achieving that goal, start figuring out what the next one's going to be. And that's the advice that I get. I get to give a lot of advice in my job. I've always got cadet classes coming through, and I spend a lot of time giving those young people advice that are just starting out their career in law enforcement. And that's one of the big ones there is I teach them about goal setting.
I love that. I love that. Thank you for saying that. And then I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Ay.
A little birdie told me you like Spanish dichos.
Oh, yes.
Do you have a favorite one?
Yes.
What is it?
No hay mal que por bien no
I
venga.
love that.
Yeah.
I love that. You want to explain it in English?
Sure. Everything that happens in your life, even though if it's bad, something good always comes of it, right? So in other words, anything that happens in your life that's bad happened for something good. Something good's coming.
Yeah. You know what I mean? I love that. Thank you. And then the last question I have for you, I always like to ask this question in this podcast. If you could go back in time and talk to little Javier.
I'd say cut your hair. That mullet's not cool.
You can pick the age, whatever age you want, but young you. What would you say to him after everything you've been through, everything you've learned, everything you've gone through now as being the sheriff? What would you tell little Javier?
I would say just that. No hay mal que por bien no venga. Don't, heartbreak's not forever, right? the little girl that doesn't want to date you anymore, it's okay. You're going to marry one that looks like a supermodel, and we've been married for 25 years now.
Love that. Yeah.
And so the fact that you didn't make first string on the football team, you're going to be just fine. You didn't get the lead in that school play, but there's a reason for it. Don't worry about it. I would just go back and just let go of the heartaches. Don't let it get you down. Just keep plugging away.
I love that. Thank you so much. Anything else you want to share? Any other message for the San Antonio community, the Bexar County community?
Just that I really enjoy my job. Right now my plan is to be the sheriff here for 40 years, right? Mm-hmm. But if it's not, let's say my career takes me elsewhere or something else comes along. I want people to know that whether my career here as Bexar County Sheriff is 9 years, 12 years, or 48 years, at the end of it, I will have left it all on the field. I play that way every single day. I don't hold anything back. So at the end of it, I can promise you'll have gotten all of my effort.
Well, thank you so much for everything you do for our community. Thank you for being here finally.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been great getting to know you in a deeper level.
Yes,
and like I said at the beginning, you are truly a person that I admire. And it's been great seeing you grow into the different positions that you're in. And as sheriff, thank you for everything you do for us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching one more episode of Momentos and Voices. We'll see you next time.